friends, Heidi here from Rain Country. God is good all the time, and I hope you're not getting tired of seeing me in the brown and black and the red and black flannels, but they're my two newest ones that I got at garage sales this year, and I love them. They're my favorites, and they're perfect for this crisp fall weather. I just love it. So anyway, today I'm going to be making some more cider, and I'm going to be turning the pulp this time into applesauce. Now, last time what I did when I made this batch over here, which I don't know if you can see the difference from the last video where I was showing where I first started it, it has gone from being kind of more of a tan or brownish color to gold. It's turning more and more gold every day. So this is the one I'm actually fermenting to turn into an apple wine. But what I'm going to do today is make apple juice or cider just for drinking fresh, because it is so incredibly delicious right out of the apple press. And I also wanted to share with you, so here's a picture of the apple press. This is the picture I got from the store, from Amazon, because that's where I bought it, and that's why it looks so picture perfect. But anyway, I'm really happy with it, and right now I have some of my crushed apples, or not crushed, but cut up apples in the press ready to go. I want to get it topped off. It takes, I think, 3 pans like this of the chopped up apples to get them in, to fill up that press. Now when I did this, I just spent pretty much the whole day processing apples so I could get a full gallon, so I could get this started. But since this is just going to be juice, I'm just going to put them in quart jars and put them in the refrigerator. And if I get too much more than what we can drink through at a time, I'll just go ahead and freeze them up like I've done with milk and anything else. Just freeze them right in the jars, practicing those safe freezing measures like I talked about in that one video that I'll link to up here and down below. So today what I'm doing differently, because I'm actually turning these apples into apple sauce, the pulp that's left over, rather than using to make vinegar like I did here in this last batch. You can see I had 8 more jars of vinegar that I started and still had a ton of pulp left over, which was cool because I can compost it and throw it out to the chickens. The chickens have been having a heyday with all those little pieces of apples, much easier for them to eat. And I'm only going to start 2 more jars of vinegar out of the skins and the cores, the peels and the cores from these apples, because I currently already have a dozen of these jars going, so this is going to give me 14 total, and I'm running out of space to put them. So the rest will just go to compost and the chickens. Now, the difference that I did was in the first batch, I especially took some of these smaller apples and I just chopped them up, seeds, peels, cores and all, and threw them into my little manual food processor. Now this one is actually newer than the last one I had. I still have that one, but after several years of heavy use, the plastic on the bottom was starting to crack, and so I just recently bought this one, more to have as a backup, but I'm actually liking this one better because it's just a little bit bigger, so I can put several whole apples in here at a time and chop them up. But I still use my apple slicer core. I'm still peeling them by hand, even though I'm getting some nicer, bigger apples. But because I'm using all the different sizes, it's just easier to take the peel off, peel it by hand, because I can do that pretty quickly. So anyway, before, since I wasn't making sauce out of that, but just making vinegar out of the pulp that was left over, that was fine. But since I want to turn this to applesauce and possibly more apple butter, I don't really want the cores and all that stuff in there. And I think the peels would be fine, but I'm going to go ahead and peel them just in case, because I do plan on giving a lot of this away as gifts, and I want to make sure I have a nice, good quality apple sauce and apple butter. So basically what I'm doing is I've just been peeling the apples by hand, like so. And no, I don't worry about bruises or blemishes. Besides, my apples always have blemishes on them. They always have. I'm not sure if it's just the type of apples they are. But just like I said in a recent Facebook post I made, ugly, just like beauty, is only skin deep. You peel that skin away and look what's under there. A beautiful, tasty, wonderful apple that's got high quality. So though some people might not think my apples are very pretty to look at, when I look at them, I see beauty, because what I see is what I know is below the surface, and that is a high quality, excellent tasting apple that far surpasses the Skin Deep Beauty only apples that you can find at the store. So anyway, I just, you can use your peeler if you want, especially if you have lots of, like these apples right here would peel really good on the peeler. But ever since I took that peeler off, I can't figure out how to get it back on there, and I don't know where the manual is. So I find it best to put the apple on stem first, because if that stem's still on there, it's not in your way. But I have a tendency to get it straighter when I do that. Run it through there, and then I just toss it in there like that. I'm going to take the core and all my peels and then toss them in that jar, and that's what I'm going to start vinegar just like I did here. So I just got this batch started, and like I said, I'm only going to do that one more jar. So I want to line this up so that the end here is going to line up with this hole, and just slice it up. I throw it just like that into this chopper, and so on. And so then I'm going to go ahead and finish filling this chopper up, and I'll get back to you when that's full because I want to show you how well this chops. So I'm really, the other one chopped really good too. The blades always stayed really sharp, but it is smaller, and like I said, the plastic was starting to crack. I don't know why they don't make these out of stainless, but then you wouldn't be able to see through. And glass, I don't know. I think they could make this out of a good heavy duty glass, like a, you know, like a Pyrex type glass, or even the Anchor brand. But anyway, let me finish filling this up so I can show you how well this chops. Okay, so right now I have 5 apples in here. A couple of them were on the smaller size, but 3 of them were a normal size, pretty much a normal size apple, like this. So you can see they're still, I just threw them in their whole. I didn't cut the slices in half. It's just like that. I put my top on, and I will link to this below if you're interested. You can put a damp rag under here, but there's rubber, like silicone down here. That helps it cling to the counter, but a damp wash rag works pretty good too. Anyway, I just turn it a few times. Usually about 10, 12 cranks, something like that. And look at that. See, I didn't even need to cut those slices in half. And then just fill up my pan, because it's easier, since I have the press sitting outside, it's easier for me to just fill up my pan and then go out there and fill that up. Now the apple press itself, Patrick, what he did this morning to make it a little bit easier was he took a big steel plate and he fastened it, because the feet, the base of the thing is metal, and so the feet have little holes so that you can bolt it onto a table, onto whatever kind of setup you have. So I don't want it permanently attached to my deck or anything like that, because I want to be able to put the whole thing away when I'm not using it. So he put it on a steel plate that's wide enough that we can actually stand on it while we're cranking it. Because when you first start cranking it, it's actually pretty simple, but the farther down you go and you want to get the most juice out of those apples, it's hard to turn it without turning the whole thing. And so being able to stand on that and hold it in place is going to really help. Couple little pointers that if you get a press like this with the bag, as you can see in this photo right here, the bag is not made to fit over the outside of the thing, and which would be nice for when you're filling it, so that, you know, it stays open. But a little trick is to simply cover the one side, stretch it across, and hook it over a couple of those slats so it stays in place. So as you're pouring your apple pieces in there, it's, you know, it'll stay open for you until you're ready to then fold it over the top of the apples, because that's why they don't make it that big, because you're going to fold it over when you're ready. Now, some other ways that you can crush your apples: you can get a grinder, you can build your own grinder. We don't have that. I decided to try just doing the processor method, and it worked really well the first time around. And I did look around on YouTube and found there are other people that use a food processor. Now, some people, what they do is they'll take their whole apples and then just stick them in a bucket, and then get a big, maybe 4x4 or at least a 4-inch diameter chunk of wood, and they just smash them up until it's basically pulp. And they said at first it feels like it's going to take forever, but once they start smashing, it actually goes pretty quickly, and then you can put them in there. And down the road, maybe we'll get a grinder or something, but this method here is working really good. Now, the way I'm doing it right now is taking longer than the way I did it the other day, simply because I'm peeling and coring. But if you're not, you know, if you're just going to use your pulp for feeding to your chickens, to use as compost for your garden, or to make vinegar out of, this is totally unnecessary. And you might even find, like I said earlier, for making your applesauce and apple butter, since you process it up anyway, like with a stick blender or something, you might find leaving the peels on is totally fine. So the only thing you're still going to want to do is to make sure they get cored, because you really don't want the seeds and those little pieces in there, because it's just not very enjoyable. But don't worry about those seeds hurting you. They're not going to hurt you. I plan on someday doing a video on natural form of cyanide that's in apple seeds, and that why you shouldn't fear them. But that's for down the road. So for doing stuff like cider and vinegar and things like that, there's no way you're going to get an overabundance of the natural form of cyanide that is going to harm you in any way. In fact, it's going to be somewhat healthy for you. So don't worry about those apple seeds. So back to the press. So the next thing you're going to do is, after you fold the mesh bag over all of your pulp, you're going to lay the two halves of the disc that goes down on top of that. And then what you're going to want to do is, you're going to want to the press comes with a couple other chunks of wood that you put between those plates, and then the part that's actually going to start pressing it down, it's not going to be enough. So what Pat did was he made me 4 more pieces, because you're going to need to get it high up as possible. Now when you first start, if you lay them all upright like this, it's going to make it too tall, and then you won't be able to get this piece, or even if you can get this piece and the plastic washer that goes on there, you might not be able to get this piece on. So you got to make sure you have enough there that you can at least get this to grip on there so that you can turn it, because this is going to be the mechanism. You slide the handle in place and you start turning it. So what I do is I stack the pieces. I get them, like I might have a couple that are standing upright, but some are laying down like this, and then I'll start grinding it until it gets to a point where I can unwind it and then turn a couple of those pieces upright and then get that back on there, and that way I can finish the job. Because if you have it too low and you don't have enough pulp in there on top of that, when you get down to a certain point, you're only going to be able to go so far, because you're going to then start bumping into the top of the basket itself. So just keep that in mind, that, you know, I would say have another 2 sets of boards, you know, chunks of wood that are evenly sized. You got to make sure they're even, the same size, so that you can use those for getting that placement right. So anyway, then you just keep cranking on it. Make sure you have something under there to catch the juice. This is going to take a long time. So you may initially feel a little bummed out with the amount of juice you get from a great amount of apples. But if you have, I mean, we're getting all these apples from just one tree. I'm on my 4th basket, full basket of apples, and I still have several more baskets of apples out there on the tree. And I'm going to have tons of applesauce and apple butter, and I already have a whole bunch of dehydrated apples from previous years. And so just keep in mind, you know, if you got a lot of apples, then this is one way that you can start using them up. And even if you don't want to turn all the pulp into apple butter and applesauce and whatever else, it makes a great compost for your garden. So it's still not going to go to waste, and fodder for your livestock. I know that it took one whole basket of apples to make this gallon here. One whole laundry basket full of apples for this. But again, it's all going to use in some way or another. And it's worth every bit of it. And it's work, but it didn't cost anything monetarily other than the investment in the press itself, which I paid under $100 for it. And you could even build your own. Now, like I said in a previous video, Patrick had considered building an apple press, but he has had so many other more important projects going on and helping other people with various things. You know, the roof, you know, that was definitely more important, and I needed to get this apple press this year so I could get this done. And so I figured I wasn't going to pester him with that one anymore. But there are lots of ideas out there. I'm sure you can just do a search on YouTube or even just in your browser to how to make your own apple press. I'm positive, looking at this setup here, that it's not that hard. Initially, I wanted to buy an old-fashioned kind, but they are really expensive, and I mean, they're 3 times more expensive than what I've got here, at least the ones I was looking at. And I'm happy with this. It's working for me, and it'll also be used for my grapes and any other thing I decide to turn to juice. And then if you have a whole several days that you can dedicate to this right in a row, and you don't want to, you don't want to ferment it for preservation, that maybe you would just want it for the juice, you've got options. If you want to keep it raw, you can freeze your juice. Again, I meant going back to that video that I mentioned earlier that you can find in a link below or up here. Just practice your safe freezing methods. And yes, there's a reason why I try to avoid using plastic bags and plastic this and plastic that. And I will be talking about that in another video probably real soon. And then the other option is, the funny thing is, my very first video that I ever put on YouTube was canning grape juice, making and canning grape juice. And then I was doing all the mashing by hand of the grapes. And that's, just keep in mind, that's going to cook it. Either way you look at it, you're going to be cooking the juice. It's no longer going to be raw, but you can really easily can your own apple juice and then put it away so you'll have it all year long. All right, well, I'm almost done pressing out those apples, and I know initially I was going to finish out the video before I did all that and just show you clips. However, I remembered a few things I forgot to say earlier and some observations I made on this particular batch. Now, here's the apple juice I got so far. I already got a ½ gallon, and I didn't even fill the cider press as full as I did before, when it took me a whole basketful to get this much juice. But here's the realization I made, and I wondered if this might be the case, that by peeling and coring the apples before putting them in there, though it's more work, I was able to get a lot more juice out of it already just from that. So that is how I'm going to do it from now on, and then I'll have even more uses for the pulp. Initially, again, it's a little more work, but really not too, it didn't take me that much longer to go ahead and peel and core the apples and then throw them in there, and then to be able to get this much at a time just without even finishing out the whole process. Now, here was the other thing I wanted to say, is that when it gets to that point where it gets harder to turn, where you can't feel you can turn it anymore, and by the way, that metal plate helped a lot, then let it sit for a while, because it will continue to strain and drain out. And then the apples will soften, and then you can go crank on it again, probably a few more times, and get a little bit more juice out of there. So I might possibly get another cup or two of juice out of there, but I was thrilled how much I got out, just the difference it was, because the apples are softer without the peels and cores in there, and were much easier to mash. And so that's the way I recommend doing it. And then again, I have all this wonderful pulp that is seed-free, core-free, stem-free, and skin-free, that gives me much more options. I can still take it and turn it into vinegar, or I can use it for making the applesauce or the apple butter. And here's another great idea. You can spread it out on your fruit roll-up trays for your dehydrator, and then dehydrate them like that, and then powder them up and use them for all kinds of things. In fact, I think I might do that with some of it, just so I can try it and see how it turns out. I'm really curious about that, because ever since people mentioned dehydrating apples and turning them into a powder to use as flavoring, I've been very curious about that. Now, I've used my dehydrated apples in teas just as is, but I haven't tried just as a powder, so I think that sounds really cool. Well, I hope this gets you thinking about next year, because it's probably, by the time you see this video, it's going to be too late to consider doing stuff like this with your apples or even your pears this year. But you might want to consider investing in that cider press. I'll link to the one that we got down below, or learning how to build your own so you have it all ready for next year when you're ready to go. But I'm really happy with the manual processor. It worked great, especially the newer one, because I could put 5 whole apples. I did try putting 7 whole apples in there after they were sliced, and I couldn't get it to budge. So 5 seems to be the maximum, where you can do anywhere from 12 to 15 rotations, and it's all ground up and ready to go. And perfect. I'm so happy with this. So, all right, well, I hope you enjoyed this video and that you learned something new. Thanks for watching. Take care, and God bless.